Welcome to the Wealthy Retailer Podcast, brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. I'm your host, Dan Holman. We're recording today for the week of June 11th. And producer Rob, and my man Lolly here, we were just talking about it's over. It's over. It's back on here in Alberta. How you doing this morning, Rob?
Very good. Very good. Yeah, that was, we were saying how yesterday's front page of the newspaper said this isn't over. And then I think a press conference a few hours later, no, it is. Well, not quite, but definitely on the path to reopening and getting, a good sense of normalcy, and which is great to see. Everyone's ready for it, and I think everyone's taking the right steps to be safe. But we can battle our way through this. So
I agree.
Speaking of battling our way through this, just a quick rundown what we're going to talk about today. Some more exciting headlines from retail. A bit about technology that, not long ago was only available to large chains. A story about independent retailers having this distinct advantage over Amazon. Great to see that. Another large chain, unfortunately, under restructuring protection. We'll chat a little bit on that one. And a really recent real estate report showing that our region here, Edmonton, the retail world is poised for a breakout. So that's pretty exciting to see. But our first story comes to us from the Business in Vancouver group, BIV.com. And it's a neat story. It talks about how, it's hard to peg a year exactly, but it wouldn't have been very many years ago that there was just no way a small retailer could get into the world of e-commerce, that integration. And great little story about a lady with two jewelry shops, how she took this opportunity to really step into the world of e-commerce. And, her comment in the story, there's been a big divide between what independent retail could afford for e-commerce compared with the big chains. And that's really changing. So, Dan, to share some thoughts on that.
Well, I think, it's funny. I was on a webinar yesterday with, one of our favorite companies, Management One, and they did a webinar on, digitalizing your store. And, Josh Orr from Streamline Retail was on. Josh has got a great podcast as well. He's in Texas and has a really, outward opinion about the power of e-com, and has been that way for a long time. I've been a slow adopter of converting a brick and mortar store, to that digital age. But I will say this, when Layla, I think was her name in the article, she talked about, I didn't realize, yes, it's a lot of work, but I didn't realize I could do that. And true enough, for a long time, it was very early adopters and big retail that saw, e-com as a play for them, and had the bandwidth to take it on, financially or otherwise. And today, it's just not the case. Layla goes in to talk about it's maybe a little bit more difficult than some perceive, or that maybe is projected, but it's really not. It is a very simple space to get into. Our partners at Shopify, have made this very, very easy. And they have adopted this strategy that you don't have to be best, you have to be fast. You have to be first. And so Shopify's made it really easy. Along with their POS integration, they now are providing a true ease of market or ease of entry, omni-channel, almost full omni-channel experience, for that digital age. And on this webinar, I talked about it from Management One, someone from a footwear retailer, large footwear retailer, talked about his first retail site being in the 90s, his first e-com site. Well, Truthfully, it's only been in the last, 24 months that we've really seen the advancement. Right. And certainly in the last, 90 days, it has been crazy. And we, at Canadian Retail Solutions, we spent a lot of energy helping people integrate point of sale and, their digital presentation, whether that's Shopify or BigCommerce or whatever. So,
well, and she makes mention in the story too that she had some past experience that she said it's not something to totally tread lightly into. It does take quite a bit. I remember myself, I was in a marketing e-commerce building discussion probably about 5 years ago, and it stuck with me then, the view that to get into e-commerce is akin to building a second brick and mortar location 100 miles down the road, right, with a different building, a different team, and just for the mindset of realizing that this is what you needed to do. That was 5 years ago, right? And I think that is even tremendously changed now. So,
and I'll tell you, with the increase or the influx of digital space and the ease of access for all retailers, the bigger players are now recognizing that their brick and mortar stores are more of an advertising medium. They are a customer engagement or capture spot or space versus the traditional selling model. I think it's maybe Doug Stevens from Retail Profit came out and said, in today's retail age, you have to recognize your brick and mortar, as part of your advertising medium. And it's about customer acquisition, not, customer transaction, the way we've seen it in the past. So I think that maybe piggybacks onto the true power of this digital, space that people want to be in.
Well, on that, we talked a bit last week too about that, that line item on your P&L, that kind of, whether it's your brick and mortar, your lease, or to your marketing and this, your e-commerce efforts, that number more or less is going to stay the same.
It's going to stay the same. And the more astute a retailer becomes, the more they advance themselves. They start to look at these expenses together as a percentage of revenue. And so no longer are we going to dwell on, the cost of my retail space without also looking at the cost of my digital space and combining my marketing, my digital experience, and my brick and mortar or my lease rates all together as a percentage of revenue.
Right. Well, again, that story was on bib.com. We'll have a link in the newsletter about it. And anyone wants to check out her website, it's, we say Layla's or Lala's? I wonder.
Well, I wasn't sure.
LALAS.ca. So go check that out. And I'm a nickname Lolly guy, so I'm going to go with Lala. I think that's So, our next story comes from Forbes.com, and I think we all love the theme of this one, and that the headline of the story is "Move Over Amazon, the big boys are coming back to play," and it really zeroes in on independent local retailers having that one distinct advantage over Amazon. And that's never going away. If anything, it just got totally enhanced over the past few months, and that is human interaction. So talk to us about that, Dan.
Yeah, it's funny. Even Amazon is recognizing, with their introduction of brick and mortar stores, we as human beings need interaction. There's a very small exception to that rule, we need human interaction, and that can only come from within a physical space. Even a hologram, even a virtual connection like this, Rob, still leaves us with some level of disconnect. We need interaction. And over the last 12 weeks, we've seen more and more interaction. While socially distanced, I get all that stuff. But we have seen more interaction. We've shopped more frequently than we have in the past. We spent maybe more frequent. We frequented convenience and grocery more than we have done in the past for shorter periods of time. And so that delivered a better engagement or connection, albeit behind a sneeze screen. It still created that. And I think that when we say, watch out, Amazon, the big boy is back, or the big boys are back, it is about independent retail making this surge. And I think a little later on, we're going to talk about, what happens when big retail, closes their doors. It just creates more opportunity for that independent retailer to deliver a very unique experience. We've all shopped at, stores, our favorite hardware stores, that are riddled with, what are identified as experts in their field, whether that's flooring or electrical or whatever. But, they're not a servient retail environment.
Right.
And what people look for in brick and mortar is someone to serve them, someone to understand what their needs are, someone to identify their needs, even when they don't know what their needs truly are. They start by thinking about an item versus, a solution. And that's what we look for from the independent retailer. And Amazon, no matter how much technology we drive into it, will never replace the human interaction, reaction, and promotion of a solution.
What's really cool with that too is, you've had dozens of retail owners on this podcast, and every single one of them said the thing they absolutely loved the most is being out on that floor, talking to their customers. And what's cool about that is we're not, or small retail is not being encouraged to do something that's the unhappy place. Like, if anything,
right.
It's, that's where you're truly going to excel. You love doing it. Go do more of that. Find a way to do more of that, and you will be rewarded. For
sure. And I think that the very best retailers have always been extroverts, not introverts.
Right.
I wake up in the morning and I love to look at my phone and see the Shopify sales, that have rung through while I've been sleeping.
Yeah.
Or the early morning, cash register ring that is the e-com, but it does not replace, that being on the floor and talking with someone and laughing and the joy of seeing someone,
right.
Truly happy in making a purchase.
Right on. Well, folks, want to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. Since 1991, they've provided comprehensive point-of-sale retail software support and training, along with inventory management solutions to empower retailers in Canada and throughout North America. If you are looking for new solutions in your retail environment or getting ready to launch your new operation, be sure to check out retailbycrs.com for more info. Remember, Canadian Retail Solutions exist to make retailers better. Right, Dan?
We got to change that tagline. That seems a little bit too chest puffed up.
I'm going with the windy one. We'll come up with a more natural approach to.
Yeah.
You know what? I think you guys, you're the coach with the knowledge and the tools, more importantly, to just guide the retailer to the best success that they.
Yeah, and we believe that all of those things are truly tools. As I look at point of sale, it's a hammer. It's a wrench in the toolbox.
Yeah.
We want to pick the best one. And I think that, synonymously across the company, everyone is wholeheartedly service above self. And that's truly what we mean when we say we exist to make retailers better. We exist to help them be better, whatever their challenge is. So yeah, thanks for the plug. Appreciate it.
Here's this story from cbc.ca. It fortunately, talks about another Canadian, an outdoor retailer, Sale, has filed for bankruptcy protection. The Laval, Quebec-based retailer said in a statement recently that they filed for protection under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act as part of a restructuring process. They employ 1,800 people, 14 stores, plus another 4 Sportium stores. Here, we chatted last week, Dan, another headline of that, we'll say the bigger retailers, is this the kind of seizing on timing, opportunity?
For sure. Yeah, I think it is. And let's remember who's putting that message out there. There is always a negative connotation to a lot of what we see that comes out of, all of these large media platforms. It's not really from the perspective of, glass is overflowing, but rather the glass is half empty.
Right.
I continued to read in that article, it might have been, I don't remember, Dig 360 or somebody, it said, hey, last year's last year's retail apocalypse was just a preview to what's going to happen this year, what is happening this year. Okay. And the reality is, yes, there are stores that need restructuring. But this is a very opportunistic approach to reinventing yourself. I've said this for a long time, Rob. We are in retail. By its very nature, we are insolvent. We we believe from an accounting perspective that we have this massive asset that is our inventory.
Yeah.
But look at what happens to that inventory when, you know, we're forced to liquidate it. It's worth pennies on the dollar. It is in fact a liability. And in all cases, in a lot of cases, that liability outweighs our liquid asset or our you know, quick cash position. So retail, independent or otherwise, by definition is insolvent. And that doesn't, I don't say that to be the negative person or the scary person. That's real,
right.
You know, and when we look at a great organization, you know, what on the surface looks like a great organization, Sale's been around for a long time, super great outdoor stores, you know, heavily into sort of Eastern Ontario and Quebec, really great outdoor stores. And they're taking this opportunity to strengthen their organization, to reinvent themselves. And we're going to hear it over and over and over again. You know, when we talk about, you know, what's happening in Edmonton, the influx of retail, I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump ahead, but the influx of retail, you know, that you see in Edmonton comes on the back of bigger retailers restructuring and taking advantage of their ability to redefine who they are. And, you know, we're talking about an 18-store chain, 1,800 people. You know, this bodes the same for a 3-store, 60-person organization. If you need to reinvent yourself, you know, you better be halfway there already and not waiting for the next shoe to drop. There is no next shoe to drop. There is no second wave of COVID that's going to give you this opportunity to reinvent yourselves. The moratoriums that are being placed out there now, you know, to protect, you know, the tenants in commercial space, you know, I think is giving us the opportunity to stand back and say, wait a minute, okay, I can take a breath. I'm not being thrown out. Yes, I'm gonna have to communicate effectively with my landlord, but I'm not going anywhere. So I can develop a strategy, and I need to sit down with my, you know, my accountant, my retail coach, my landlord, my advisors, and come up with what the best strategy is to move us forward in a healthy position. And that's exactly what Sale is doing. How do we move forward in a healthier, leaner, meaner future?
Yeah. But you're right too. And, you know, raise my hand, old media guy, that most people will read 3 seconds of that headline and just summarize it to that, oh, there, retail's dead, you know, but not looking to I like the way you just put that. This is, you know, they're just kind of regathering to a healthier direction, a healthier future. And this is more, they're just taking that opportunity to you know what, there's some things we got to fix and correct and move forward.
And I think the slowdown, I mean, it takes so much firewood, you know, to keep this thing burning, that any stutter step can be can be devastating to a retail organization. Right. You know, having lived that, you know, many years ago, maybe 15 or 18 years ago, you know, where the fire required, you know, the wood required to keep the fire going is so much that one little stutter step can start this sprawling demise. And you know, when people talk about a retail apocalypse, you know, apocalypse isn't the right word. I mean, this is an earthquake. This is, you know, something that we rebuild from, not the death. You know, people for a long time have talked about the death of retail. Well, here we hit it. You know, we hit the peak, and it's not death. It's the reinvention of retail. Yeah. Retail is not dead, independent or otherwise. It's not dead. It's actually going to thrive. Which
I've had some interesting conversations in the last few days that I'm going to say I really believe have been kind of kept on the quiet side for, you know, whether they feel a little guilty about that through this. They've but some retailers who have just had the best May in the history of their company. But they're definitely not out there yelling it, but it just kind of, I think, speaks that, you know, it's just dollars are moving around. They're just dollars are being reallocated everywhere, and it's big change and interesting things are happening.
We certainly see that, you know, in the bike space, you know, in anything that's outdoor driven, retailers are doing very well. I mean, if you own a bike store, you probably are coming off your best 1 or 2 months in the history of your store, right? But that they are in some cases afraid to say that.
Right.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want to celebrate while others are not.
Or jinx themselves.
And jinx themselves, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
Who
But
knows?
we don't think about them having their worst May ever 2 years ago when,
Right.
In Alberta, there was a foot of snow on the ground.
Right.
We didn't think about them failing then because their season, was delayed 45 days. In this case, their season got accelerated because everybody was home looking for something to do. So it's a one-off anomaly, and they'll never measure themselves up against this year. This will be the anomaly, and they're, the flat line, or it'll flatten over a large scale of years. When we look at a 5-year average,
right,
that this, May 2020 isn't so big.
And that's an interesting view. And so I'll pose that question to you, that, to not get so hung up on the highs and the lows in that day in the week. Measuring everything is super important, but how do you coach your retailers to try and what do you feel that global view should look like?
Well, I think it starts with looking at what your plan is. What's your goal? And the measurement can never be an LY comp. You can really find great success in measuring against last year, but you can also find great failure in measuring against last year. Here we are. It's the middle of June, or almost the middle of June. We're back into the throes of helping stores plan inventory, plan buying. And as we walk through our plan, I'm stroking out last year's sales because I don't care what last year was. It's a different space right now. And so really coaching a retailer to have a more global look at their business is to talk about, here's what our 90 days looks like right now.
Right.
And this is what our plan is. Our measure of success is achieving that plan, that realistic plan. It's not the measure of last year. And if we get caught up in what we've missed over last year, what we've lost, instead of where we build from here, we'll wallow for a long time.
Right on. Well, speaking of helping a retailer build a plan, I know this is a retailer that you've done some work with, really admiring what they're doing right now. So I'm going to throw it back to you. This is our opportunity of the week that Dan gets to share a little bit about a retailer shout out. Let's hear it, Dan.
I always am a little nervous. Nervous is maybe the right word. I don't want to leave anyone out. I have a somewhat equal love for all of the retailers that I work with, and those that I don't, that are out there, trucking through, today's world. But this guy, a bit of an anomaly. Brad from Revolution Boutique, a guy's guy living in a women's fashion world. Really, I admire his tenacity and his fortitude and his ability to break through in a market, that's riddled with mediocrity. There's a lot of women's clothing stores.
Yeah.
And he's having great success. And I think I joked maybe with you and certainly with Brad often, they just opened another store on White Avenue. They're up to 3 stores. So they're Sherwood Park, St. Albert, and now White Ave. And we sent him a message on, I think it was March 12th or something. Hey, all your POS equipment is here. Do you want us to sit on it? And the answer was, hell no, get it over here. I'm opening my store tomorrow.
Let's go. Yeah.
And I'm just like, hey, you know what's going on, right? I don't care what's going on. It doesn't matter to me. I'm moving forward this way. And it is that not insensitive, I don't care. It was that he had a plan and he was opening that store come hell or high water. That store was going to open. And I am not turning on a website. I am a brick and mortar store. I'm going to cater to her. She wants to be in my store, until only the next day for him. I think the doors opened on the 15th or 16th and closed on the 17th. So he sat idle for a long period of time, and sort of over that period, Brad and I have been synonymous in this. We do not believe in this, that COVID is as bad for Alberta as it was made out. We don't believe that stores should have been closed. We've fought against it the whole time. I've said forever, until some higher authority than me locks my front door, I'm open for business. Right. I don't care what you think. Yeah. And, and Brad sort of had maintained that strategy through that period and converted business, did business without his website, continue to do business with women and, and satisfy something that they needed in whether that was, retail therapy or,
What do you think, Dan? Like, we just talked the story of a big chain shutting down, and here's a story of a small retailer effectively has tripled in size, and in what, the last 2 years, 3 years?
2 years. Yeah.
What do you think? What if you had to kind of pick one thing that Brad has done really well and focused on towards that growth? What would you say that is?
It was the focus on growth.
Okay.
You see, it wasn't the focus on how do I pay my rent. It wasn't the focus on, how am I going to make up anything. It was always with an eye on the future. It was always with the intention of growth. You see, and when you can put a target in front of you and not let anything interfere with that, you figure out how to get things done. I mean, we are entrepreneurs. We figure shit out. And exactly what Brad did, he figured out how to achieve his growth. Yeah. And it came on the back of him wanting growth. I talk to other retailers that have, aspirational thoughts of growth, but not a dedication to growth. It's two very different things. Yeah, someday maybe I'll have 5 stores, and Brad's attitude was always, where's our next store?
Right on.
And now that number 2's open, where's number 3 going to be? And now that number 3's open, where's 4 and 5 going?
Right. Well, on that, let's jump into our next headline, and this comes to us from the westerninvestor.com. Focuses on our local market, and we'll take it. Headline is Edmonton retail poised for a breakout. And for any of those naysayers out there, this story came out June 8th of 2020. So, this speaks to the current time. And just to share, one little bit, it focuses on things like, 2019, we saw a lot of big box retailers and big brands either close their locations or they ceased operations altogether in Edmonton. However, some of these spaces have already been backfilled by retailers, and it promotes unconventional features to their services, such as engaging and experiential retail, revamped brick and mortar, and e-commerce strategy. And so this was a Cushman Wakefield report. What were your thoughts on this, Dan?
I think for a long time, Edmonton has been, the launch pad for both, retail, but also food and beverage. We've been a hotbed for startups. I think that Edmonton has, I think we're in the top. Southgate might be number 5 in the country for top producing malls.
Okay. Wow.
We certainly have the big monster West Ed Mall. And so that really is an attraction to retail. Yeah. And if you look at the stores that have entered that space and consequentially open more spaces, it is this launch pad that Edmonton is. And I believe that it comes from us being, blue collar, not white collar.
Right.
We're blue collar. Give me $5 and I'm spending $4.80 of that right now.
Right.
I am a little bit more free with how I spend. And for retail, it's absolutely a hotbed. And we're seeing more and more of the experiential stores coming up. This is all about changing customer experience. One of my least favorite companies in the world, Canada Goose, they are my absolute least favorite brand out there. Love the product, don't love the company, for obvious reasons. They shut down independent retail, but they build great retail spaces. I can love and hate somebody at the same time for different reasons. Edmonton sees the biggest cold room in Canada. So you can walk into their cold room, you can try their product on. And I think when you look across what's going on in Edmonton, we created a ton of vacant space. Look at what happened with Sears and Targets, and we've seen some really good stores or the potential of changing that retail landscape. And I think that I read, Edmonton now, our net rent is about $25 or $24.
Yeah,
something.
just under $25 was in the reports. So $24.88.
So, we're rivaling, some pretty good space in Canada, whether that's in Toronto or in Vancouver. Edmonton is demanding good retail rates, and that's a good thing for the landlord. It's a good thing for retail, and that most retail leases in Edmonton are written with some level of, pay for performance in them. And when you get into these, high traffic, high dollar zones, you're maybe spending a little bit less in advertising and paying for that square footage. So Edmonton has always been a hotbed for retail. There's always going to be, new stores coming here. Certainly when we look at the international, invasion in retail, they want to be in Vancouver and Toronto, but they quickly migrate to Alberta ahead of all other provinces.
That phenomena, I was having a conversation last night about the 50-50s in Edmonton. The anomaly of you go to Toronto, go to a hockey game in Toronto, 50-50s, $9,000, $10,000. Come to Edmonton, it's $150,000. Right. So, to your point, they make it and they spend it. So,
right. And I think that's not just hockey. Look at what happened with, the World Juniors when they were here.
Yeah.
That's a world record still for the 50-50.
Hopefully we can break it this year. We can get back to that.
We get back to that. Certainly, that speaks to how we live in Alberta. We're giving away $100,000 at a hockey game.
Okay, well, I know you don't have $100,000 to give away, Dan, but why don't you give us a tip of the week for that independent retailer out there? What's something that they can focus on this week that'll help their business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. One of the things that I feel like we have missed out a lot on as retailers, we invest this money in our point of sale, and most retailers, use a very small percentage of their POS power. In fact, most use it as a cash register. And, I feel like my tip really is to ask ourselves, what could my point of sale do for me to help me better manage my business, better manage my store? And if you don't know the answer to how, your point of sale can better help you manage, you need to pick up the phone and call your point of sale provider. Call your business partner. I use that term over and over and over again. You call your business partner. POS providers, solution providers should be recognized as a business partner. It's a strategic alliance. And I don't have success in the point of sale space or in the retail solution or technology space without thinking of this as a partnership. And so, recognize that you're not using the potential of your point of sale system, no matter how simplistic you think it is. There's things that you don't know. And I don't judge people for not knowing what they don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And I don't know what I don't know. So pick up the phone and say, hey, can you just tell me one thing I should be using in my point of sale system that I maybe not? And whether that's analytics or feature or function, ask yourself, I'm spending money on this. Am I actually getting something back for it?
I like the, plan for it too. Put 2 hours in your calendar every month. This is I'm going to learn something new about my POS system. The first Monday of the month from 9 to 11. Yep.
And that's a really good point. If you don't plan for it, I learned a long time ago. I worked with this guy from a point of sale company, Profit Systems. They were one of the largest furniture specific, POS systems. And I worked with their then CEO, young guy's name was Rick Stark, and he taught me this PORGI, personal organization. And I was a pretty good, ops guy. I got a lot of shit done.
Yeah.
But I was frantic. I worked from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m, and I bounced from wall to wall and ceiling to ceiling and job to job. And it wasn't until he kind of taught me how to set a structure that I started to actually accomplish things in our retail stores. And on Sunday nights, I would sit down and block time in my calendar for that week on all the things I was going to do. And that was probably 1999 or 2000. I learned that. And to this day, every Sunday, I fill up my calendar for the next week. I still do it. And, if I showed you my calendar, it's full of stuff. Yeah. And it's color coded. I know what's a phone call. I know what's a to-do list item. I know what's reporting. I know what's a planning meeting or a consultation with someone. I'm a bit OCD in that if it's not in my calendar now, and maybe doesn't get done.
Well,
and I even have to wake up in the middle of the night and send myself emails. Hey, book this to do. Put it so then it's in my email. And there's probably, when I go to bed at night, there's probably 1 to 4 not unanswered but unactioned emails in my inbox, and I get about 125 a day.
Wow.
So we filter through them pretty quick, but I have time blocked in my day.
Well, we'll call that 2 good tips for the week.
Fair enough. So I should have saved that. Damn it.
Yeah. Damn, now I got to come up with another one for next week.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, listen, we've we've run probably 30 or so minutes. Let's just do a quick wrap. If you're listening to this podcast, head over to retailbycrs.com, subscribe to our newsletter. We are sharing all of the things we talk about in the podcast in that newsletter, but also some great tips there as well. We will always have things that are relevant to you, the independent retailer. Just head over to retailbycrs.com and subscribe to the newsletter. And of course, if you're listening to this on Spotify, give us a like. Let us know you are enjoying it, or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. Give us a thumbs up and let us know you're out there and listening to us. Thanks very much.
Right on. Yeah, as Dan said, head to retailbycrs.com, sign up for that newsletter. In addition to stories from today's podcast, we'll also have additional links for stories. A couple, one talks about the challenge of excess inventory at this time. Story too, Dan, about these folks, the opening of the really large second Muji location in Vancouver. So be sure to check that story out. Thanks for joining us, folks, on the Wealthy Retailer Podcast. It's brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. And remember, they exist to make retailers better. So thanks for listening, and we look forward to connecting with you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Awesome.